Hey everyone, it's me, Penrust776, your cool original defense doctor. And first things first, I'd like to thank everyone for watching, for commenting, and for signing up on the previous episode. I honestly wasn't expecting any engagement at all, but surprisingly, not only did I get more than 0 applications, I got more than 1 application. We're talking applications plural here. So thank you all so much for that. And well, I have questions to answer. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. Our first query today comes from Joel, specifically Joel from Fehology. So if you're Joel and you're watching this and you're confused because you're like, I don't have a defense team, this is a different Joel. Unless you're Joel from Fehology, in which case it's not a different Joel, this is you. By the way, Fehology, great YouTube channel, love their stuff, and go check them out, I guess. Anyway, Joel asks the following: my Dark Season is geared towards beating tanks, but struggles against +10 lethality YURIs and +10 Ninjorins. I'm trying to beef up my fast save unit without sacrificing the firepower necessary to take out well-supported Ascendant Fjorms and Brave Hectors. Help me, Dr. Defense 776, and Joel has also included a nice image here of their current fast save unit, Nagi, getting kind of beaten up by a Ninjorin. And yeah, that checks out. So, +10 lethality YURI, +10 Ninjorin. We're looking to change, ideally just the fast save unit, try and get good matchups against those units. And I think there's a third unit who needs to be considered here as well. Not a problem for the Nagi you're currently running, but I suspect perhaps the reason you're running them. It's another +10 YURI, but this one's +10 AoE YURI. Nagi obviously gets an 80% damage reduction against AoE specials, so this unit isn't a problem for her. But any replacement we're picking should be able to at least kinda handle this YURI as well as Mr. Lethality over there. So let's pop into Dual Sim and see what we can pull together. So I'm back from Dual Sim. It may not look like it because I still look exactly the same, but it's been about 6 hours of me slowly going insane. I've discovered a few things. Thing 1, if you start putting enough units in Dual Sim, it gets a little confused. I was testing a lot of units and I was starting to just absolutely, it felt like I was in bizarre world because I was looking at combats and the results were changing every time I compared them, which it shouldn't happen like that because Fae is deterministic. If you do the same combat, you should get the same result every time. Well, turns out, yeah, when you've got a whole lot of units loaded, Mass Dual Sim sometimes changes their skills behind the scenes or whatever, and you got to go back and fix them. So yeah, that was fun, and I spent a long time comparing units and wondering why results weren't being consistent before I finally realized this was happening. The second thing I realized, and way more pertinent to your question, is that there is no cheap and easy solution for +10 lethality YURI. I've been looking at fast save units and I've been comparing them at a level of investment that's not super high, because you probably don't want to waste a whole bunch of orbs just to solve one YURI problem, which could turn into a different problem when the next fancy new unit comes out, right? If you're counter building against threats, it should be a pretty cheap counter build. Well, the cheap answer doesn't quite exist. But there are a good few units that come close enough to beating plus 10 lethality units, but it only takes a little extra push to put them over the edge. So first let's look at our criteria for deciding who we're even looking at the first place. Of our units, Ninjorin is pretty strong, but ultimately she's just a brave weapon user with high attack. Lethality Yuri, on the other hand, he ignores damage reduction and 75% of your defense. Damage reduction and defense are useless against him, pretty much. And this may not seem like such a huge deal until you realize that damage reduction and defense are the two main ways of keeping your units alive in this game. So, without them, what do we have left? Well, there's a few things. I'm going to go in order from most to least effective here. The thing that's most effective against lethality Yuri, special damage reduction. Sure, he can cut through all your regular damage reduction, but if it comes from a special, that's 30% off or 50% off with Hardy Fighter that he just can't do anything about. And that is going to be enough for you to survive his attack. Second thing, triangle advantage. He's a colorless unit, but units who have weapon triangle advantage against colorless units are taking 20% off his attack. That's big. That's, in most cases, that's going to be enough if you're a fairly big, fairly bulky unit to bring him down to a kinda survivable attack, as opposed to no, you're absolutely dead levels of attack. Third, attack reduction. Sure, he cuts through your defense, but if you reduce his attack, that still comes into effect at full force. Normally we consider like +6 defense or -6 attack to be more or less the same, because, well, in the vast majority of cases, they are. But here, having specifically attack reduction against Yuri as opposed to defense increases is a big deal. It's taking damage straight off him. Fourth, HP. Okay, you need HP to live, and if your defense isn't doing anything, then HP is going to be the main source of bulk for you. So units with a lot of HP, good to consider. And last but not least, defense. Okay, sure, it's not working very well, but it does kinda work. He's taking off 75% of our defense, but that means if we can stack 4 points of defense, it's still equal to 1 point of reduced damage. And that's gonna factor into things. Okay, so looking at all this, who is the best unit to stop +10 lethality Yuri? Might surprise you. It's Henriette. Okay, and actually, let's start with, I lied. There is actually a cheap unit who can survive +10 lethality Yuri. Henriette, Raven Tome, Triangle Adept. Only slight problem is that blue units exist in this game, so although this does solve your Yuri problem, you have other problems still. This is not an ideal build to be running on defense. Really, you don't want to run this on defense at all, because it does kind of just yell to people, bring a blue unit, and they will do that, and they will kill her. So anyway, if we're not running Triangle Adept, what are we running? Well, we're running Raven Tome, we're running Distant Defense 4, and hang on a second, we're running basically her base kit here. Now, defense doesn't actually work very well against Yuri, so why Distant Defense 4? Well, it removes his visible buffs. Most lethality Yuris that I see are running a +7 or +6, depending on how they're getting it, buff to attack, because I mean, why wouldn't you? even though the defense, the 8 points of defense from distant defense are only reducing like 2 points of damage, you're also then reducing another 7 points of attack from that visible buff negation. That's big. And this is what ranged far-save units have over units like Nagi, who's also pretty decent. It's because Nagi has to run distant counter. Henriette has an option of an A slot. Henriette, of course, also being red, does quite well against your Ninjorin. Her biggest struggle is against actually AoE Yuri. But with the Raven Tome, even though she can't really do much about the out-of-combat damage, funnily enough, you can actually stack her defenses high enough quite easily, even at +0, to be able to take 0 damage in combat. You get hit by the full brunt of that AoE, get brought down to 1, and then just ding, nothing. Really, really funny behavior there. And you may notice, I said that special damage reduction is the most powerful thing against Lethality Yuri. Why doesn't this build have special damage reduction? Well, aside from the fact that ranged units can't run it, there's also the fact that actually it doesn't work against Lethality Yuri. Lethality Yuri pre-charges his lethality on player phase turn 1 and hits you with it, and there is nothing you can do to stop him from engaging turn 1 because he can run Disarm Trap and he can run Kanto to get all the way back out again. So long as his team can break buildings for him, which is fine, it's easy, he's hitting you straight away. And all the things that can pre-charge your defensive specials take effect after that. So, for your first combat against Lethality Yuri, you cannot have a defensive special pre-charged. It is cut off the list. So, anyway, Henriette. Raven Tome, Henriette does really pretty admirably. But there are other options. Option 2 is Nagi, who you're already running. Nagi is Raven effect. Her weapon triangle advantage against Yuri does a lot of work, but it doesn't quite bring her to the place where she can actually beat him. But there are other things you can do, at least, to improve her matchup against Ninjorin. With Deflect Magic, Nagi doesn't quite make it. You've got 80% damage reduction against that second hit, but you're still taking 100% damage from the first hit, so Ninjorin's hitting you for 120% damage overall. And this is just enough to kill. Nagi's res stat is pretty high base, but it's not quite high enough to survive this matchup. What you can do, actually, is change her B slot. It's common to run Special Fighter on Nagi because that's what she has. And it works pretty well for her in most situations, but even though you can get big specials out of it, against Ninjorin, Yuri, these really, heavy player phase threats, they don't have bulk, meaning that you don't need to charge up a special like Glacies or Iceberg, Bonfire, Ignis against them. Glimmer will kill them. Glimmer is enough, right? So bearing that in mind, you can actually ditch the Special Fighter for something that will reduce your damage. And Nagi's a dragon, so Dragon Wall, or even Dragon's Wrath, both give you enough extra damage reduction to just push you over the edge into winning that Corrin Ninjorin matchup. Third on our list, it's another dragon. In fact, there's a lot of dragons Nagi is the only dragon with colorless advantage, but further on our list is attack reduction. Who is a dragon with attack reduction? It's Halloween Mer. Halloween Mer actually does pretty similar, if not slightly better than Nagi in most of these matchups. Halloween Mer has the attack reduction. Halloween Mer also has a lot of HP and just a big defense stat to help against Yuri. That brings them into pretty close territory, like 4 or 5 attack off surviving, which that's something that can be pushed up pretty easily with just 1 extra mythic or a little bit of support. As for the Ninjarin matchup, Halloween Mer there has the advantage of being red, a bit less res than Nagi, so it's a little close base, but with Deflect Magic, Halloween Mer survives pretty easily. Or if you want to run Dragon Wall, it's 40% damage reduction, so against a Brave weapon it's actually doing the same amount of damage reduction as Deflect Magic. It also helps against AoE Yuri for reducing his damage. Doesn't do anything against Lethality Yuri, obviously, but basically nothing you can run in the B slot helps against Lethality Yuri, so it's free for us to use for other things. And yeah, she works pretty great. In fact, I think you might have seen people on the Fehology Discord, great place to hang out, have been simming matchups where with just a little extra push, a Halloween Mer is actually able to tank a +10 Lethality Yuri. Great option. Another weird one, Gustav. Gustav, you may think, what's up with Gustav? Well, he's got a really big HP stat, number 1. He's got a weapon with attack reduction in it, number 2. 3, his defense is immensely chunky, and that's just enough to bring him into the range where he can kind of sort of survive Lethality Yuris. Again, not quite the +10 Lethality Yuri, but any other Yuri he'll handle quite well, and with a bit of outside support he can potentially take on the +10. What also surprised me is how well a fast save Gustav actually does against our other threats here. One thing, he has a very high visible defense stat. The AoE Yuri just doesn't do that much to him at all. It's honestly quite impressive. And his res is quite low, but against Ninjarin, he has 75% damage reduction against the first hit. That's basically a similar amount of damage reduction to a regular save unit running Deflect Magic anyway. So throw Deflect Magic on him, or even just stack his res a bit using, the fancy little bit extra distant counter, or some sort of ally support, and he survives that as well. It's honestly kind of nuts. So those are my recommendations. There's a few other units who could be built this kind of way as well. Pirate Serta obviously is Gustav. They're basically the same unit, except Pirate Serta is blue, so has a slightly worse Ninjarin matchup. Duoidan is a red dragon who is pretty similar in terms of performance to Halloween Mer, but has slightly less attack reduction, so performs a little bit worse. And actually, male Halloween Grima, again, is a dragon with attack reduction. He's colorless though, so he's going to struggle a bit more with Ninjarin as opposed to the red dragons, but he might have better matchups elsewhere across the board. Also, again, a little bit less attack reduction, though he does have extra sustain in the form of in-combat healing if he gets his special off. So hopefully I've given you a lot to think about there. The last question, of course, is how do you get that extra push to turn these units that aren't quite +10 lethality Yuris into that aren't quite beating plus 10 lethality Yuris into units that actually win that matchup. And well, you've got a couple of options there. Number one, run an extra mythic. If you can find a way to fit an extra mythic into your team somehow, that's plus 5 HP right there, and maybe also extra defensive stats depending on what type of mythic it is. Obviously, not necessarily an easy task. But there's another way, and that's running a unit with attack reduction support. There's a couple of units that can do this. Any flying unit can do this on your front line, because range skills are able to do attack -4. Simple as. And that's a flat for attack reduction on YURI. That's 4 points of damage swing. For a lot of these units, that's enough to make the difference. Even better than this, there are some units who have this in a PRF form as well. One to look at, in my opinion, would be Kinshi Hinoka, who has not only, being a flying unit, the ability to run a Rhine skill, but also a massive amount of stat reduction in her PRF, and it has that double effectiveness, so is actually pretty formidable as an offensive unit as well. Alternately, as far as frontliners go, Hell has her PRF C slot for that, and is a mythic, so have her tank maybe, I don't know. But anyway, you've got options, is all I'm saying. Still, thanks for a really intriguing question there. I hope I could help. Second query today comes from, honestly, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, so let's guess, cephea, they, them, who comes to me with a fake problem, or so they claim. They would apparently be perfectly happy with losing, but they have a very funny team which they'd like to become funnier, I guess. You may call this a fake problem, but to me, it's real. Sure, maybe your goal isn't winning, but winning in the video game doesn't have to be your goal. I started getting into Aether Raids because I thought that people losing to my team was very funny, and that is a great goal to have. The most important part of this isn't that you're winning, it's that you're enjoying yourself, so I don't think this is fake at all. Making a very silly team is just as valid as making one that will get you to the high ranks. Anyway, here's the team. It is Dragon Rally, a rally heist as they've called it. Sophis, as the frontliner, gets rallied by Niffle here, and then Niffle kills things. Great, love it. The issue they have is that, well, after getting danced, Niffle kind of just clogs up the point. Here's an illustration of the problem. At this point, nothing more can really happen. Niffle's there, and none of the other units can go around her. She's just kind of in the way. Okay. And as a result, Niffle is just barely missing kills against things like Brave Hectors. What can we do about this? Well, okay. I'm going to keep the concept of the team roughly as it is, because I think it's really cool what you've got here. Sure, it isn't going to win any matches, except for the matches it does win, because people will find a way to lose to anything in this game, literally anything, but let's try and optimize it for what it does do, which is making a fool out of people. So, okay, one thing we can do to begin with. Niffle rallying. Naturally, she's going to rally from here, as you're probably aware, which works, I guess. What could be possible is deliberately dragging her around the front of the team. If this square is blocked off, she will always rally Sophis from here or here if she can reach those tiles. Might be worth looking at, because that gets her further forward, gives her more room to run around, and lets you put a unit here. Now, the second question is how to stop her clogging up this area, how to give more unit space to follow up rather than just Niffle. And this is a hard one to answer. Back in the old days, I would have said give her a movement B slot. Lunge, hit and run. Lunge really is the best one, of course. But something like that, in order to pull that unit into your team and make space there. But unfortunately, save skills break those. So while those might work against some tanks, you might still want to maybe consider them. If a save unit parks itself up in your area, you've still got issues. What else could we do? Well, we can't really get your other dragons out here without teleportation or extra movement, and because Niffle is going to be standing in the spot to attack from, well, there's not really much we can do here, to be honest. They are matched in terms of range. If you've got a range 2 unit teleporting to a range 1 unit, then they're able to attack the same target, or the other way around also works. Range 1 units teleporting to a range 2 unit can attack the same target, but because these are all range 1, well, an easy answer doesn't exist, but there are a few things you can do. 1, say we're in this situation here. If these spaces here are freed up, someone with a movement assist, an actual movement assist, something like reposition or draw back, who can reach this tile here, will use it on Niffle to free up that space for some other unit to attack, if they can attack from it. How are you getting that unit out there? Well, probably my best idea would be deliberately running an HP reducing build on Niffle. Maybe a push skill in the A slot, maybe Fury in the S slot, because that's an option now. Get her HP low and then Wings of Mercy to her. That's one option. The other option I'd be tempted to run, however, is honestly just kind of give up on the other units following up on Niffle. Let Niffle do all the work, because although a unit can't really follow up while Niffle's standing there, and a unit teleporting to Niffle who's matching ranges with Niffle can't attack the same target as Niffle's attacking, if a dancer can teleport to Niffle's side, then maybe you're getting somewhere. So, Sophie's front line, Niffle to rally, fill the rest of the team with dancers with Wings of Mercy, and get Niffle's HP low deliberately. The other thing to consider would be making more space around this area where Niffle is actually attacking from. You want her to be able to get danced after she attacks from all 3 open sides to get the maximum number of dances possible. And maybe switching maps would be a good thing for that. There's actually some new maps coming out with the latest patch. The Doc Alzheimer and the other one maps could be quite useful for that. Basically, though, you just want to make sure that this tile where you're expecting Sophis or Niffle to attack from, you can fit dancers on all three sides of that. Still, really interesting team. Kind of a difficult problem to solve, honestly, but I hope you're able to make something really entertaining out of it. And our third and final query for this episode comes from Nathan. Nathan has written an essay, which I really appreciate. I did write in the question, be as detailed as possible. Nathan has been as detailed as possible. Nathan has a kind of pseudo cav line here going on, combination cav line, note line. Julia, Fallen Julia, is the 7th unit, gets danced by Legendary Azura to act as a cav. And then for remaining slots, you've got Gunthra and Joleaf overlapping as calves as well, with Note in the middle line. In addition, Bramamond rallies one of these two units by going through Note. That lets him get danced by Triantra, so he's also overlapping with those two columns. It's a pretty nice setup, I'm not gonna lie. But it does have, apparently, some problems. Problem one is just matchup coverage. Nathan here is looking for someone to beat Fallen Edelgard, and I guess other tanks as well, but Fallen Edelgard is their biggest one, and also maybe someone to replace Fallen Julia. And I can understand wanting to replace Fallen Julia, because Fallen Julia is, not a terrible unit, but also not necessarily the strongest. For reference, Julia's PRF grants attack res -6 on foe during combat with a solo condition, and additionally gives a guaranteed follow-up attack if the foe doesn't have dragon effectiveness. Definitely a pretty neat tome, but the solo condition, as Nathan has actually pointed out, sometimes doesn't go off because the enemy gets to choose where to tank your team, right? If you tank close up, the units can't really get far enough away to properly get that solo condition off. Additionally, against most foes, especially foes like Fallen Edelgard, but against a lot of foes, that guaranteed follow-up attack isn't really getting much use if you don't survive to make it. Fallen Julia only has 17 base defense, so if she isn't making that guaranteed follow-up attack, she's really only got attack res -6 on her tome on a solo condition, which is kind of worse than a lot of inheritable weapons out there. So, well, what can we do? In addition, Fallen Julia kind of breaks the overlap a little, because at cav range, Fallen Julia, that final square of her movement isn't covered by Leaf or Gunthra or Bramamond. So, there's definitely some things we can do here, and the final issue is the overall weakness to ranged hit and run. YURI, New Year's, those guys. So Nathan is also considering running a fast save unit. We've discussed fast save options earlier. If you're not worried about YURI specifically, though, I'd still say that Ascendant Fjorm is the easiest fast save option to run. So let's go down things step by step. First off, Fallen Edelgard. What do you need to beat Fallen Edelgard? Well, Fallen Edelgard has a few things. Fallen Edelgard has 40% damage reduction on the first hit. Fallen Edelgard has a wary fighter effect. Fallen Edelgard has a special fighter effect. And Fallen Edelgard counterattacks you pretty dang hard. She also has a bit of healing. It's not much, but it can make a difference if you're chipping her for small numbers, so you want to hit her for the big numbers. What kind of units beat Fallen Edelgard? Well, ideally, you want one of a few things. You want either a pre-charged high damage special that cuts through damage reduction, or out of combat damage that's big enough to get her below the 25% threshold that most of her effects operate off of, or high damage overall and the ability to hit her 2 times. This can be done a number of ways, either with Windsweep and Null Follow-Up, or Null Follow-Up and high defense to survive her counter effect, or a guaranteed follow-up to counter out her wary and high defense, and then win the speed check, or there's a lot of ways to go about it, basically. You've handily given me a list of units who you're considering to try and beat her. You mentioned Brave Marianne. Brave Marianne is potentially an option. Brave Marianne honestly doesn't have the best matchups, though. She is really nice for the extra actions, but she does kind of lack in terms of damage. The survivability is nice, but damage. And she also, against Fallen Edelgard, can sometimes struggle to charge that extra action special unless you're running Flashing Blade, which again, that's losing out on damage in the S slot. You also mentioned Duo Micaiah. Duo Micaiah, again, very strong, has armor effective damage, but isn't quite the unit we're looking for here, I think. She hits very hard on the first attack, but that's getting eaten up by Adel's damage reduction. The second attack, Duo Micaiah is never going to make. 1, because she's slow. 2, because just like Fallen Julia, she doesn't have a defense stat. As far as other options here go, though, Ophelia, definitely a very strong one, and Legendary Lilina, another really good anti-Fallen Edelgard option. If you've ever seen Rival Bremains, look at what Chaos does in Rival Bremains with their Legendary Lilina. AoE damage has the potential to just absolutely shred Fallen Edelgards. One other potential option, who isn't in your brigade but you mention in the post, is Duo Dagger. Duo Dagger, I think, is a very good one. If you have a way of getting buffs on her, Duo Dagger is absolutely tanky enough to survive a hit from Fallen Edelgard, and has Null Follow-Up, and can do some pretty decent damage. Even if Duo Dagger doesn't kill, she can at least soften Fallen Edelgard up enough and strip off that 40% damage reduction on the first combat, so that any of your other units could finish her off. You mentioned replacing Brandmond as well, because Brandmond doesn't do particularly well. And here's a thought. If Duo Dagger, with her Pathfinder, is your rally unit, that could actually help with your overlap problems as well. Especially if, for instance, you wanted to replace Note with a far save unit, because a far save unit in Note's position would then cover the entire team. If Duo Dagger rallied out instead, that would then provide the same Pathfinder overlap between Gunthra and Duo Leaf that they have currently. Additionally, rallying out like that would shed debuffs from Duo Dagger, letting you buff her to get the full effect of her PRF without worrying about things like panic. Consider it. other options who you don't have but could definitely be buildable, Reinhardt or any brave weapons user can double up hits. Units who have built-in null follow-up in their weapon can run Wind Sweep to cut through Fallen Angle Guard. There's a lot of those. Both the legendary Byleths do pretty well at this job. Summer Duo Byleth does pretty well at this. You've got options there. And then the last question is what to do about Julia. Well, that is a tough one. One thing I'd be tempted to do is have the unit in Julia's position not be the 7th unit and not get danced by your legendary Azura, because, well, that way, if they're at infantry range, sure, you're losing a little bit of back row coverage there, but on the other hand, you've got perfect overlap between them and Leaf. That might work, that might not work. You'd have to give it a shot and see. If they're a 2-ranged unit, then you've actually got a lot of really good, strong 2-ranged units here. That could be Atri, it could be Legendary Claude, very strong. It could be Duo Micaiah, who, again, maybe not a great anti-Fallen Edelgard unit, but will very successfully kill most other things. And it's a duo unit to boot, which is nice for reducing the Gale Force ability, the hit and run ability of your team. As for the last question, building and trap placement, all in all, I think you've got it pretty good. What I would say, if you're going for a fast save unit, and you don't have to go for a fast save unit, depending on how much of a problem ranged hit and run is actually causing for you, you might want one, you might not. We'll see how it goes. But what you could do in that case is, swap out, put a fast save unit somewhere on that front line, and then, well, you can't really stop ranged attackers with traps. Disarm trap exists, is the real crux of the issue here. It exists, there's nothing you can do about it. So if you're giving up disarm or range 2 to disarm trap, then kind of really your second best option is to just try and dissuade melee ranged attackers who you still can't do much about. To do that, your best option is literally just putting your 4 traps in a line out the front here, across the front of the team. It's a bit silly, but it might work. You never know. Though actually thinking about it, one other thing, I was saying use Joe Dagger as the rally unit, but Joe Dagger could actually be quite nice as that 7th slot unit as well, because again, getting danced by Legendary Azura cleanses debuffs from her, and Legendary Azura's PRF writes her whatever her highest single stat buff is to all her stats. So all you need is something like an opening or just any stat buffing skill on your team to get a stat buff onto her, and getting danced by Legendary Azura is gonna multiply that out everywhere. And again, the Pathfinder there, in that case, if you're doing that, the Pathfinder is gonna help a whole bunch with overlap. In which case, you could do something similar to my old Dagger Trap or later Note Trap. If you want to get rid of Branamond, right? Cut Branamond, run a fast save unit where Note currently is, but instead of cutting Note, move Note back to Branamond's spot, have an Order skill on one of your dancers. You need to slightly move Legendary Azura's position here so that Legendary Azura Because at the moment, if you did that, Note in this position would try and rally YURI from the back after Legendary Azura dances. So you need to find a way to solve that somehow, but you're smart, I'm sure you can manage it. But in essence, have Note with orders try and rally Gunthra or YURI from the front to get the same overlap as they currently have, but just a little bit fancier. That's an option. Again, just spitballing here. Try it. Give it a test. See if you can tank it or not. See what the AI does. But yeah, that's my best ideas for you. Hope you have good luck with it. So, all in all, I'd call that a pretty fruitful round of defense doctoring. Did you guys learn anything? I sure learned a lot, albeit mostly about how Mass Dual Sim works. But I did also get some good new ideas for anti-YURI countermeasures, which hopefully you'll get to see on my defense real soon. Yep, you're not the only people who use this information. I use it as well. Anyway, you'll probably also be glad to hear that Defense Doctor will be returning at some point in the future. The form is still open. I'm leaving it open. If you've answered already, feel free to answer again. I've left it so you can edit your responses. There's a link to it in the description. I'll do more of this when it fills up again. I hope you're looking forward to it. I've been a bit busy recently, hence why there's been no videos, but I'll catch up on that backlog right as soon as I get the opportunity to. So, like, really soon now, assuming this video is coming out, it'll be right after this. And as always, thank you all for watching, and if you want to see any more of my stuff, go take a look, and a subscription will hopefully make my videos show up in your house when they come out. So do that. What am I saying? Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.